Off is a game I wish I could have enjoyed. It'd probably be more pleasant socially for me to roll with the punches and pretend it was a game I was enamored with, but I owe my viewers, both new and old, the honest courtesy of what I actually think. There is some value here, I will concede. It had some interesting narrative tricks up its sleeve that had me reconsidering my stance on certain characters, a strange setting, and awesome music. Yet, I was still coming up short as far as having a positive opinion on the game. I wanted desperately to enjoy Off, but the closer I looked at some of its individual parts, the more I realized that there was practically nothing for me here. Perhaps this is being a little harsh because this game came out all the way back in 2008, but I think even within the context of its time, Off doesn't even approach basic quality standards. A lot of the celebration around this game has merit, and while the overworld sprites might look like they were made by a dog, the in-battle art is the exact opposite, giving glimpses into the creepy atmosphere the game could have achieved more powerfully had its direction been of more consistent quality. Off feels like something plucked from the dehydrated brain of an artist. Enemies are malformations of what they once were, twisted and corrupted until they take on a different shape entirely. The world isn't afraid to leave you in the dark narratively for a good portion of its runtime. I want to call the music haunting, but I feel like there isn't even an invented word for it. It's so otherworldly, so encroaching that it's hard to even put a label on it, and I mean that in the best way. Off's soundtrack is one of its biggest strengths. You play as an entity known only as the Batter, who's tasked with purifying the different realms and purging the world of creatures called specters. Simple starting point, but as with any good story, there's more to it as time goes on. The cat character you quickly become acquainted with introduces himself as the judge, and he talks like an edgy dude that found a thesaurus. At first I found him to be pretentious and almost ominous, but as the layers of his character slowly peel back, you realize that he actually has a much softer heart than the protagonist does. We'll get back to this. I did at first admire the persistence of the Batter and how committed he was to finishing his goal. He's visiting these zones to do a job, and that's what he plans to achieve. RPG Maker games have a habit of using a story that's so good, the worst parts of it are worth getting through regardless. I loved one-shot story and characters enough that I put up with getting lost, obtuse puzzles, and cryptic hallways to ultimately satisfy my curiosity with the tale that the game was telling. Off's characters slowly become more complex, and there are shades to each of them that aren't immediately visible, which is great, but it never felt good enough that it was worth putting up with the game's worst moments, and its worst moments are most of the game. If you're angry that I do not like Off, I wouldn't be. You by all means have the majority opinion. A good amount of people seem to walk away from Off feeling narratively satisfied, and for the intellectually curious, the obtuse nature of the plot gives a lot of opportunities for picking it apart and coming up with interesting theories. We are certainly living in your preferred timeline, so don't purify my comments section just yet until you've seen each point I've made in this video, because even if you don't align with my verdict, there could be individual parts that you agree with. I think that even if you're a diehard Off fan, you'll concede that the battles are not the best part of the game. The combat is unfortunately about as mundane as they come for turn-based video games. I don't think it needed to be the most innovative thing in the world, especially with how old this game is, but there were very few moments where I felt challenged because of interesting systems or design. When your action bar is full, you'll be able to do a variety of different things, including standard attacks, items, running away, or magic, which uses a resource that is unfortunately abbreviated to CP. Yet, within these handful of options, there was never really a moment where I had to weigh certain moves against one another to find the best possible strategy to defeat a boss or enemy. It very quickly dissolved into spamming the attack button to get through these battles as soon as possible, which is an unfortunate habit to pick up in any RPG if you ask me. Even the party members you gain are just circles, like literal circles. They're just canvases for items and abilities. The one kind thing about the combat I can say is how trippy the sprites are. While the aesthetic of the overworld is viciously underwhelming, the sprites you'll see in battle are equal parts terrifying and imposing. They're great, and again, had more of the game looked like this instead of an AI's attempt at what spriting looked like, it could have been much more atmospheric in its visuals. The battle sprites are terrifying, yes, but not nearly as terrifying and imposing as the game's puzzles. And I use the term puzzles lightly because some of these border on frustration simulator instead. Now, as a disclaimer, for me, puzzles are much better in a game as a supplemental mechanic, something that makes a good diversion between battles to divvy up the action. That's just me, me, I don't expect every game to cater to exactly what I want, or for every game to have battles as the main crux of its gameplay loop. I'm just telling you that if you aren't a puzzle guy, you are not going to enjoy your time with Off at all. Most of your time spent in this game will be solving them, and it isn't uncommon to need a pen and paper on hand while you're playing. Puzzles vary from pure memorization to looking over images to find clues for questions, and those range from feeling intellectually satisfying to how on earth did I solve that just now. Between solving puzzles and clicking your way through battles, you'll be met with more story dialogue. It isn't until later in the story that it dawns on you that the batter isn't as simple of a character as he was made out to be in the beginning. This purification process of defeating guardians in these different zones isn't peaceful. Destroying the guardian renders each world extinct, and you can actually transverse these locations after you beat them to see just how desolate they are, which is narratively neat, and it did have some impact on me, I guess, but I didn't really feel attached to any of the characters or happenings of each of these worlds. These places are already so weird, so devoid of warmth, that going through them again in a white color palette just didn't really do it for me as much as it probably did other players. The difference in ambition between the batter and the judge begins with Valerie, the judge's younger brother. He becomes one of the guardians you beat, and the batter treats it as business as usual. I liked this because going off my first impressions of these characters, I figured the opposite would have been true here. As I said earlier, I'd be lying if I said there was nothing of value in Off. There are bits and pieces of dialogue in the game's narrative that did genuinely catch me off guard and rope me in a little bit. The barren wastelands of the areas you beat, the seeds of doubt regarding the batter's ambitions, and his general lack of remorse for what happened to these guardians, who they were before, or what led them to being here. It's neat stuff, and while it might sound kind of played out, considering how long ago Off came out, it was way ahead of its time in regards to this kind of storytelling. Fourth wall breaks that address the player character might have been popularized in Undertale, but it was used narratively before that, not just in Off, but in One Shot as well. Off will probably keep its status as a niche under-the-radar RPG, and I think that's an appropriate spot for it, though I'd love for a fan remake to file down its ludicrously rough edges so that it was easier to enjoy its best parts.